Howdy, folks. This is Scott with the Game Audio Institute, and we are continuing our third, I think it is, video into the Benjolin project in Unreal. So let's go see how that's turning out, because it's been a bit of a challenge, because it's all based on my non-knowledge of Unreal, pretty much. So we're going to sort of see what's going on essentially here. Okay, so what I ended up doing actually was starting from the original Constellation project and just making a duplicate of that, and then just making a new scene essentially, because I had already set up everything kind of how I needed to have it work. Because one of the issues that's really, really common with Unreal is that when you click inside here, you're going to automatically like capture the mouse, and when you move around, you will automatically capture the mouse. I ended up kind of not doing that because I don't want that to happen. Actually, I still want this to be an app. I don't want it to be a game. That's the thing that it's really important to understand. I'm definitely not interested in making this as a game. It needs to be an app. So what I want to do is actually have a situation where I just grab this little ball and then I can change the pitch of the oscillator. I mean, again, these are just what are called unit tests. You're just basically seeing, does this simple thing work? And unfortunately, just even setting it up so that I could like physically grab this thing and move it, and that kind of stuff was really quite an involved process. Mainly due to the fact that, again, my non-understanding of Unreal blueprints, is basically blocking me here. And I'm trying to do what I can, and even getting help from ChatGPT and some friends here and there and stuff like that. So anyway, but basically that's the idea. This is pretty much what's going on. Right now there's just a test oscillator that's going to play. Very simple little thing. And the deal is that if you pick it up and move it, nothing's going to happen because it's not going to happen. So essentially I'm just going to be like kind of picking this up. I only really have like 2 dimensions that I can do actually. So I can only go like left and right and up and down. Really can't go forward and back successfully at the moment. But anyway, so I'm going to show you kind of how this thing got to where it was and what it took. Again, I don't know if this will be helpful for people who are, kind of early on Unreal or whatever like that. Now, I have 2 objects that I'm dealing with, right? One of them is my mouse, and the other one is the sphere. The sphere is technically in 3D space. The mouse is in 2D space. So I need to be able to do a bunch of different things in order to be able to make it all work correctly. So we first start with this one, and we're going to go all the way back to a bunch of things, essentially doing a bunch of things. Some of this is old information, and we're not even working it anymore because it was used and then thrown out, and I haven't cleaned up yet. So we've got basically 2 events. These become standard with pretty much all of the blueprint stuff. You have event begin play and event tick. So the thing is that I definitely want to find out what object it is that I'm running over. I want to be able to then pick up the object and then move it side to side and do stuff with it essentially. Now the sphere controller can do some things in terms of finding stuff. I would say that most of it pretty much did not really take place as much on the sphere object that I'm picking up. There's a couple things here. It says event actor on clicked. So that's basically when I click the actor, it's going to have, I've got a few, I don't know if you can see these parameters. Yeah, there they are. So I've got some of these things are going to be good and some of them are not as well, but basically we have some of them are being used and some of them are not. But basically I have is grabbed Boolean and this grab location, which is actually not used. The mouse control is used, and the sphere BP is the blueprint for the sphere itself, which is a useful thing to have sometimes. So what happens is that I set the is grabbed Boolean to true, and I need to know that I've grabbed that object. So that information is also going to be conveyed to the script on the mouse controller as well. And then it says get actor of class, and the class is mouse controller. Now, there was a lot of different ways that I had to actually look up some videos to basically figure this out, and this seemed to be the best way to go forward. Essentially, the idea ends up being is that it knows that it wants to get the mouse controller. So the tricky thing that I kept running into was the idea that like I could get a type of a class, but I couldn't get the instance of the class. That was the tricky part that I've trying to get happening. So the idea is that I get the mouse controller and then I get the mesh that is essentially there, and then the mesh object, and that's the static mesh component, which is basically the sphere. Essentially, I'm getting the sphere that way. So that's the idea. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting the static object that the mouse controller is hooked up to, essentially. So is grabbed goes into the condition. Yeah, this branch is here again. Most of this information is kind of old and not as relevant, but I needed to be able to at least set that Boolean to true when I'm clicking on the actor, essentially. So if we go over then to the mouse controller, this is one that's basically doing the most of the heavy lifting. It's got things like parameter tags for a name, which I will be definitely doing more of because I think I'm probably going to have multiple controls like this that you see here with the sphere, so that I can control, ideally I'd like to do it as three-dimensional inside there, but I'm not running this in VR at least to begin with, and then later on I'll probably do a little bit more of that. Once I've got the basic thing going, I mean, using VR controls will be literally child's play at that point. It'll be pretty easy to just like move them around and get them to do stuff. But again, that's only going to give me 6 controls. There are technically 13 on this. You could use a button if you wanted to, and then get the other 3, and then kind of go back and forth between that if you want to. So I'll see what feels right to me overall as a concept. I don't know. Anyway, so the idea is the event's going to be in play, and one of the things we need to do for this is when we first start doing this, I need to make sure that we have the set input mode, game and UI, and that we are not locking the mouse at all, and we're not hiding the cursor during capture. All of these things that are super important. Basically, the player controller just becomes reference to self because that's what this is, the player controller. Also, the notice thing, the show mouse cursor has been turned on. So we're definitely making sure that we turn on the mouse cursor. So this is basically all happens when we start the thing. I just want to make sure that the mouse cursor is going to be visible because that's what I want to have happen. Then we have the event tick, and the event tick is basically going to look for the mouse down event from this thing, essentially. So the idea is that mouse down is going to be true here and false there. It's not really communicating to anything, but because it's setting the value for an object that's there and it has that object here, it's essentially, this is still the same situation. It's still retrieving from that same change. So then that branches, and all we're really concerned with at the moment is the true state of whether the mouse is down. We don't really care if the mouse is up at the moment. And what I was doing was getting the player controller and then the target. And then this is super important, the convert mouse location to world space. And it is tricky. It wasn't as easy as you would think. It would basically, as soon as I grabbed it, it was like, it would convert it to world space and put it at like 2000x or, 5000y or whatever. So it was really kind of out of hand. So I definitely had to do a lot of massaging of that data. So here we go, world location. We set world location. That's actually our vector here. And I just wanted to print the strings so that I definitely knew what that it was changing. And now here comes what I had to do in order to be able to make it work at least a little bit inside the screen. It's a little bit tricky right now because the way that things are going, the way that I've got it configured is I'm using the scene camera, which means that wherever I put the scene camera, that's where it's going to end up when I start playing. So I'm not actually switching to a game camera when I'm starting to play, which I do want to try and fix that, because I want it to have like just a static position for that camera and not move it around. But for now, this is acceptable. It's not a perfect world, but there we go. This is not being used, so I'm not going to show you that. Yeah. So anyway, what happens is it's basically taking that executive pin, it throws into the print string that was just for debug purposes. Anyway, the main issue is we're going to break that vector of the world location. And now what we want to do is we're going to have all kinds of multipliers. It was going really, really high, so I wanted to give it a very low multiplier. Basically, this is kind of like a division, but as you know, computers don't like to divide as easily as they like to just multiply by smaller numbers. So if you have multiplies by smaller numbers, it's easier to do that than divide. And then basically what happens is I am multiplying the output after by about 5, and then I am essentially setting that the range to be mapped. Now, what is happening in this case is you'll notice that I'm only giving it 2 variables, and I'm not really giving it a variable x, or rather the variable x is literally just hard-coded to 1009. The reason why is because I wanted to make it go way too far back, and I don't have a way yet of being able to control that depth. And the depth technically is being done as x, which is a little wrong. I tend to think of it as should be z, but maybe that's just me and my Unity thinking to some extent. Anyway, what happens is we're going to map that range, and this is super important to do. And this is where having my scene camera kind of screws things up, because it means that the variables of like moving, I had to like look and see exactly what the variables were when I moved an object, and then make my multipliers so that everything mapped correctly, so that if I move something, it was going to that range. Now, this is going to be what I would want to use in order to be able to tell the oscillator that I want it to do what I want it to do, basically. You know, that I want it to actually change a value in some way. And I'll probably set out another range that would be normalized. So like a 0 to 1 value, and then maybe multiply it more when it gets into meta sounds, most likely, because so I have a frequency range. But at the moment, these are just pixel ranges inside the app itself in the viewport and that sort of stuff. So once I've got all that information massaged and limited and clamped and remapped and all that other kind of stuff, then I am setting the world location at XYZ, and there's the X that's already determined, Y and Z. I have to do this, unfortunately, even though if you disable this, you can actually set that location there. Unfortunately, for some reason, when you do that, but you don't actually have something like this make literal float, you're going to end up with constant messages that are saying that there's a problem because you didn't initialize variables or something like that. So this is the easy way to get around that issue, and that's all you have to deal with. This needed to have a get mesh object in order to be able to get this custom event. And this custom event that I made is being called by, I think, our sphere, which is the idea that I'm setting the sphere's location to where the mouse actually is, after massaging the data and stuff like that. So I believe that's the deal there. I'm probably sending get mesh somewhere. Yep, there it is. So this is the deal. This is the get actor of class with the grabbed variable, and then the mouse controller return value, and then this get mesh is actually sending that information to the static mesh component, which is the sphere in this case, and that is what's going on. So that's just a bit of the analysis, and mind you, of course, I am by no means an Unreal expert in any way, shape, or form. I am a total newbie on this, having, I don't know, a few months of experience maybe. And frankly, I get confused about how Blueprint works, because oftentimes it's weird because the flow of blueprints feels like it should be left to right. But many times when you're having to set things up, you have to go to the left and set things up further to the left sometimes in order to be able to make things happen so that they plug into the left inputs, and then things can go to the right. Or not, in this case of like it just stops here and doesn't go any further. Anyway, so that's basically it for this point in time. We're going to look at the next bit, which is to try to make the pitch go up and down if we can. That would be a cool thing. That'll be a nice, option, and probably make, I don't know, maybe do like a LFO or something like that. So make an LFO work with X, and then pitch go up and down with Y. Some simple thing like that, and then we can start actually delving into, like, the controls that I can use inside meta sounds in order to be able to do what I need to do. And I don't know, for example, if shift registers are possible that are easy or not. We'll all have to see. So it'll be a new discovery, and we shall see whether things work or not. But in this case, I hope this helps you get your weird game audio on. All right, man. Take care.